Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever wondered if simply being online a lot makes you truly digitally literate?
Hmm.
It's easy to assume so, right? But in today's hyper-connected world, the answer is, well, it's far more complex than you might imagine.
It really is much more nuanced.
So we're about to take a deep dive into the surprising realities of digital literacy. We're moving beyond just, knowing how to click
Right.
to understanding the profound impact of our online interactions.
Mm.
We'll explore global frameworks for digital skills, uncover how different generations navigate this digital landscape.
Yeah, that generational aspect is fascinating.
Totally. And
Right.
perhaps most fascinatingly, we'll reveal a pretty counterintuitive insight: how too much digital engagement might actually reduce your ability to discern information.
That one definitely challenges common assumptions.
Doesn't it, Jess?
Yeah.
Our sources for this deep dive include a crucial UNESCO framework paper, along with some compelling research on online social behavior, generational differences, privacy, and digital information literacy.
A solid research base.
Our mission here is really to equip you with a nuanced understanding of what it means to be truly digitally competent, so you can navigate this world with, hopefully, greater awareness and confidence.
Let's get into it.
So to kick us off, let's tackle a fundamental question that feels, well, more relevant than ever. How do we really define digital literacy in an era where technology is just constantly evolving?
Mm-hmm.
Is it just about knowing how to use apps, or is there something much deeper going on here? It feels like the goalposts are always shifting, doesn't it?
It truly does. And you've hit on a critical starting point because the terms themselves can be quite slippery.
Yeah.
So for this first part, we're going to clarify these core concepts, try to understand the global efforts to standardize what these essential skills actually are, and then, most importantly, break down the foundational components outlined by major international bodies.
Okay.
It's really about building a solid conceptual base before we dive deeper into the practicalities.
All right, let's dive into that distinction then. I think many of us, myself included, probably use digital skills and digital literacy interchangeably. So clarifying them seems key.
It is.
What exactly separates purely digital skills from the broader idea of digital literacy?
It's a crucial separation, actually. Think of digital skills as the technical how-to. These are the operational competencies.
Okay, the mechanics.
Exactly. For instance, knowing how to download an image from the internet, maybe put it in a presentation, or understanding the steps to send a tweet.
Right.
It's even as basic as knowing how to turn on a device, manage its power, create a user account, and log in securely with a password. These are discrete, functional capabilities, the manual operation, the execution of specific tasks within a digital environment.
So it's the mechanical aspect, the button pushing, the sort of procedural knowledge. But then digital literacy, that takes it to another level entirely, doesn't it? It sounds like it involves a much deeper understanding.
That's exactly right. Digital literacy goes way beyond just technical proficiency. It encompasses deeper judgment, critical thinking, ethical awareness, and a nuanced understanding of purpose, audience, and context in digital interactions.
Okay. Judgment, ethics, context.
Yeah. So taking our image example again, digital literacy isn't just knowing how to download an image.
Right.
It's about choosing appropriate images for a specific context, recognizing things like copyright licensing implications, understanding the necessity of citing sources when you use digital content, and even knowing to use alternative text for visual accessibility, to ensure inclusivity.
That's a huge difference.
Yeah.
So instead of just mechanically tweeting something out, you're thinking about the impact of that tweet, the why and who.
Precisely. Think about Twitter itself. A digital skill is knowing how to use the platform, how to compose a tweet, how to retweet, the basics.
Sure.
Digital literacy, however, delves into much deeper questions. When would you choose to use Twitter versus, say, a more private communication forum? Why would you choose Twitter for online advocacy, and who might be putting themselves at risk by engaging in that kind of public discourse?
Right, the potential consequences.
Exactly. It's about recognizing the broader implications and potential fallout of your digital actions and understanding the cultural and generational nuances in these digital environments. It's about promoting self-empowerment and active, informed, participatory citizenship online.
The analogy you used earlier about driving a car really helps clarify this for me. Knowing how to operate the car, steering, accelerating, braking, that's the digital skill.
Yeah, the how to.
But understanding all the road rules,
Yeah,
navigating complex traffic, predicting what other drivers might do, and grasping the broader implications like safety, environmental impact, legal stuff, that's digital literacy.
that's it.
It's the difference between just being able to operate a tool and truly understanding its place and impact in the world.
It's a
I like
very
that.
apt analogy, yeah. And it really highlights why this deeper understanding is so critical. This isn't just an academic exercise, you know?
That feels very practical.
It is. It's about being an effective, responsible, and safe participant in our increasingly digital society. And to understand how this is being standardized globally, we need to look at some key organizations. A crucial source for our deep dive today is the Global Framework of Reference on Digital Literacy Skills for Indicator 4.4.2, which was published back in 2018.
Okay, and this paper comes from a pretty hefty source. The United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, and its statistical arm, the UNESCO Institute for Statistics, UIS. What's their background? Why are they the ones defining this?
Well, UNESCO itself, formed way back in 1945, is a global body, currently with 195 member states. It's dedicated to peace and security through international collaboration in education, science, culture, and communication.
Okay.
Its statistical arm, the UIS, was established in 1999 and basically serves as the UN's central hub for global statistics in these critical areas. So when they publish a framework on digital literacy, it carries the weight of, comprehensive global data and analysis. This specific paper, authored by researchers from the University of Hong Kong, is really a pivotal reference point.
And its core purpose sounds pretty critical for setting a global standard, especially when you think about the huge differences in tech development across countries.
Indeed. The framework's main aim is to provide a global reference for digital literacy skills, but one that's designed to be relevant and adaptable across countries with vastly different levels of development.
So flexible.
Exactly. It's not a rigid, one-size-fits-all thing, but more of a flexible guide. And central to this framework, a really key reference point is DigComp 2.0.
DigComp 2.0.
Yeah, it's another major framework. It was selected because it had already synthesized major digital literacy frameworks from around the world and had gone through an extensive consultation and development process. So it represents a comprehensive, internationally vetted view of these competence areas.
Okay, so let's dive into these core competence areas of digital literacy, the ones derived from DigComp 2.0. It sounds like this is where we see the full scope.
It is. These areas provide a structured way to think about what digital literacy truly entails, moving from, basic operation all the way up to complex engagement.
Right. Starting with the absolute basics, we have Area 0, fundamentals of hardware and software.
This seems pretty intuitive, right? Turning things on and off.
It might seem intuitive, yeah, but it's foundational. You can't do anything else without it. This area covers the basic knowledge needed for operating devices, the ability to turn them on and off, make sure they're charged, and importantly, effectively lock them for security.
It also includes managing software things like creating and maintaining user accounts, understanding good password management practices, and knowing how to navigate privacy settings. These are the absolute entry points to interacting digitally.
Gotcha. Then we move into Area 1, information and data literacy. This feels like where things start getting much more complex, especially with just the sheer volume of information flying around online.
Oh, absolutely. This area is critical for navigating the modern information landscape. It involves skills in browsing, searching, and filtering digital content to find what you actually need. But maybe more importantly, it emphasizes evaluating the credibility and reliability of sources.
That's huge today.
It's massive, especially with misinformation being so pervasive. It also includes the practical ability to effectively organize, store, and retrieve digital data and information, making sure it's accessible and manageable when you need it.
Okay. Next up is Area 2, communication and collaboration. It definitely goes beyond just like sending an email, doesn't it?
Far beyond, yeah. This competence area is about interacting thoughtfully through various digital technologies. It includes sharing data and content appropriately and securely.
Securely, yeah.
A key element here is engaging in civic participation through digital services, everything from accessing e-government platforms, to participating in online advocacy.
Right.
It also covers collaborating effectively with others in digital spaces, understanding and applying netiquette, the sort of unwritten rules of polite and appropriate behavior online,
Hmm.
and very importantly, managing one's digital identity and reputation, understanding how you're perceived and represented online.
That's a massive shift from just basic communication skills.
Mhm.
Then we have Area 3, digital content creation. This sounds like it involves more than just typing out a text message.
It absolutely does. This area covers competencies in developing original digital content, but also integrating and re-elaborating existing digital content in new ways, remixing, adapting. A crucial part of this is understanding copyright and licenses, making sure you're creating and sharing content legally and ethically. It even extends to basic programming skills.
Programming?
Real basic skills. Recognizing that in a digitally fluent world, some level of understanding of how code works, even conceptually, can be really beneficial.
Interesting. Okay, Area 4, safety. This is obviously paramount in our online world. What exactly does this cover beyond just, say, passwords?
Safety is multifaceted here. It certainly includes protecting your devices from threats like malware, but it's also about safeguarding your personal data and privacy, which is, as we know, a huge and growing concern for many users.
Definitely.
It also extends to protecting health and well-being in digital environments. This includes understanding and mitigating risks like cyberbullying or the effects of excessive screen time. And interestingly, it also considers the environmental impact of digital technologies.
I noticed that.
Yeah, promoting awareness of sustainable digital practices. Like, what's the footprint of all this data storage?
Wow. And finally, Area 5, problem solving. This seems to sort of tie everything together.
Indeed, it does. This area focuses on the ability to identify and solve technical problems you encounter in digital environments, fixing glitches, troubleshooting.
Right.
It includes identifying needs and figuring out technological responses, essentially, recognizing a problem, and knowing how digital tools might offer a solution. It also encourages creatively using digital technologies to solve novel problems and, importantly, recognizing your own digital competence gaps.
Going what you don't know.
Exactly, and actively seeking opportunities for self-development and maybe even supporting others in their digital learning journey. It also introduces this idea of computational thinking.
Computational thinking.
Yeah, which is basically about approaching problems in a structured way that a computer could potentially execute, breaking them down into logical steps. It's a way of thinking.
So putting it all together, this framework paints a really comprehensive picture of what it truly means to be digitally literate. It extends far, far beyond simple technical aptitude. It's about being a critical, ethical, and adaptive participant in the digital world. For you, looking at all these areas, what stands out as maybe the most surprising or perhaps overlooked skill deemed essential in this global framework? For me, it was that environmental impact piece. It shows how deeply integrated digital life is into every aspect of our existence now.
Yeah, I agree with your observation on the environmental impact. It really speaks to a holistic view of digital citizenship, doesn't it?
It does.
For me, I think the inclusion of computational thinking, even as a proposed addition within problem solving, is particularly noteworthy
Why is that?
because it signals a shift.
Yeah.
A shift from merely using digital tools to understanding the underlying logic of how they operate, and maybe even how to manipulate that logic for novel solutions. It's a skill traditionally associated with computer science, right?
Absolutely.
But its integration here shows a recognition that this kind of foundational programming logic is becoming a broader literacy, not just some niche expertise. It fundamentally changes the relationship users can have with technology, empowering them to move beyond just consumption to genuine creation and innovation. It's a deeper level of engagement.
Building on that really comprehensive framework, let's shift our focus now. How do these digital literacy concepts actually translate into tangible, everyday experiences, across different parts of the world and in various economic sectors? The big question is, do the required skills change depending on where you are or what you're doing? It feels like the context would dramatically alter what digital literacy really means for an individual on the ground.
You've hit on a critical point there. Context is everything. So for this segment, we'll explore some real-world examples gathered globally. We'll analyze how different technologies, especially the difference between basic mobile phones versus internet-enabled smartphones, demand different competencies.
Right.
And then we'll look at specific case studies to understand the dynamic nature of digital proficiency, how it evolves.
Okay, so How did the researchers actually go about gathering these real-world examples to inform that global framework? It must have been quite a challenge to get a truly comprehensive picture from all over the world.
It was a systematic effort, definitely. Researchers used things like Google and YouTube to search for news and media reports, specifically focusing on low and middle income countries to get that diverse perspective.
Okay.
They also used what they called a snowball process, finding one source and then following links or references to find further information from associated sources like app store pages or company websites.
Following the trail.
Exactly. Out of nearly 60 initial examples they found from outside Europe, they selected 20 based on the clarity and richness of the information available in English. They needed good, detailed data to map the digital competences accurately.
That makes sense. You need robust information to properly map the skills involved. Now, where did these examples come from, both geographically and in terms of the types of activities or sectors?
They were sourced from 6 key sectors, 4 major economic or employment sectors: agriculture, energy, finance, and transportation.
Big ones.
Yeah. Plus 2 sectors focusing more on community empowerment for vulnerable groups, like low-skilled or low-literate women, and displaced populations such as refugees.
Okay, important social contexts, too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And geographically, these cases spanned across Asia, places like China, India, Indonesia, Philippines, Singapore, Pakistan, Latin America, specifically Haiti, the Middle East and North Africa with the Syrian Arab Republic, and sub-Saharan Africa, Rwanda, Somalia, Kenya, Nigeria, Zambia.
Wow, a really broad spread.
It is. Think of specific services like M-Pesa in Kenya for finance.
Yeah, M-Pesa, I've definitely heard of that. Mobile money, right?
Exactly, a pioneering example. Or Grab and Grab Pay in Singapore for finance and transport. Gojek in Indonesia doing similar things. IFCO Kisan in India for agriculture. Even initiatives like GERPNA for migration support in the Syrian Arab Republic and NCOPA for providing energy access in Kenya.
So if you were to visualize this, you'd see these points scattered across a world map, really demonstrating the global relevance of digital literacy across just incredibly diverse human activities and economic engines. It's definitely not just about Silicon Valley tech hubs.
Not at all. It's a compelling illustration of how digital tools are weaving themselves into the fabric of daily life and economic activity across the globe, and crucially, requiring varying levels of digital literacy for people to actually use them effectively.
Right.
And this brings us to a really critical aspect the researchers looked at: device dependence and functionality. They specifically differentiated between functions available on just basic mobile phones, the older feature phones, and those only accessible on internet-enabled smartphones.
That's a key distinction, isn't it? Because smartphone penetration isn't universal, especially in some of the regions you mentioned. So what functions are available pretty much regardless of the device?
There are some basic functions where there's no real difference, what they call device-agnostic functions. Things like turning a device on and off, charging it,
Okay, the absolute basics.
and sending and receiving basic text messages like SMS. These require really minimal digital literacy, often just the physical operation, and a basic understanding of how messaging works.
And then there are functions that are possible on a basic mobile phone, but maybe they involve an intermediary, like not direct internet use.
That's correct. These are mobile phone-dependent functions, but they typically operate through an intermediary. For example, buyers and sellers might interact, but through a human agent who uses the digital system. Or maybe topping up an account for a service is done through a local agent, not directly on the phone by the user.
Okay.
These often involve digital communication behind the scenes, but without direct internet connectivity needed on the user's specific device.
Got it. And finally, the truly internet-enabled, smartphone-only functions. This is where the digital literacy demands really ramp up, I imagine.
Absolutely. These functions are only available through an internet-enabled device like a smartphone. This category includes more advanced generic functions like logging into accounts, managing user profiles and passwords, locking devices securely.
Right, the stuff we do all the time.
Yeah. It also covers searching for goods and services online and comparing prices, maybe changing the language settings in an app, sharing your location data, creating a public profile on a platform, and crucially, searching for, understanding, and approving privacy policy statements.
Oof, that last one's tough even for savvy users.
Tell me about it. And furthermore, this category includes complex financial transactions, both within a single app, like paying through M-Pesa, and maybe even between different apps.
Okay.
The insight here is crystal clear. The type of device available to someone significantly dictates the level and the type of digital literacy required. Smartphone adoption really pushes the need for more sophisticated skills.
That makes perfect sense. The more complex the tool and its capabilities, the more complex the skills needed to navigate it effectively and safely. Now let's look at how this actually plays out in real-world scenarios using the pathway mapping methodology the report talks about. It illustrates this progression using 3 distinct agriculture use cases, showing a clear hierarchy of required digital competence. Can you walk us through them?
Yeah, these agricultural examples are excellent for demonstrating the progressive demands on digital literacy. The first one describes a farmer in India who makes better farming and trading decisions using a mobile phone service. This is a relatively low-tech scenario.
Okay.
The farmer receives personalized SMS messages daily, maybe about weather forecasts, market prices for their crops, new farming practices. Their digital literacy primarily involves browsing and filtering these messages to find the relevant information and maybe comparing prices listed for different markets.
So very foundational information literacy, finding relevant info, basic comparison, and basic communication via SMS.
Exactly. It's about basic information retrieval and simple comparison.
What's the next step up in complexity then?
The second use case involves a farmer in Uganda who conveniently buys and sells products via a smartphone app. This is a significant leap in required literacy.
Okay, a smartphone app changes things.
Big time. This farmer needs to be able to first search for and download an app like Agro Market Day, which implies understanding app stores and ecosystems.
Right.
Once they have the app, they need to browse listings, evaluate recommendations, maybe for genuine tools or seeds, and make informed purchase decisions. This requires more advanced information evaluation skills.
Judging quality and trustworthiness online.
Precisely. Communication and collaboration skills are also elevated because they're likely interacting directly with buyers or sellers within the app, maybe even sharing advertisements for their own produce.
That's a massive jump in complexity from just receiving SMS. You're moving from fairly passive information receipt to active engagement, transaction, evaluation, maybe even basic digital marketing. What's the most advanced example in this agriculture pathway?
The third and most advanced use case illustrates a farmer who builds a data-driven irrigation system using Arduino programming.
Wow, okay. Arduino programming. That's serious.
It is. This demands an entirely different set of high-level digital literacies. It requires actual programming skills, a deep understanding of hardware components like moisture sensors, wires, power supplies, and how they all interact.
Building the physical system, too.
Yes. The farmer needs to be able to organize their code for readability, maybe troubleshoot it when it doesn't work, and likely engage with online communities, forums, documentation to figure things out. This particular use case really brings in that need for computational thinking we mentioned earlier.
Right. Structuring the problems.
Approaching the challenge of automated irrigation in a way that can be solved systematically with technology, breaking it down into logical steps and coding them.
Wow. That progression is genuinely eye-opening. It moves from something relatively straightforward, SMS-based, to incredibly complex digital demands involving hardware, software, programming, online collaboration, all within the same domain of agriculture. It really hammers home how incredibly varied digital literacy needs can be depending on the task and the tech.
And it's not just agriculture, right? You mentioned e-government examples as well.
Yes, exactly. And 2 use cases from e-government further illustrate these varying competence levels. They show that even within the same broad economic area, the skills can differ significantly just based on the sophistication of the specific system being used.
Okay, what are they?
The first e-government example is an entrepreneur registering for a Dubai MyID single sign-on service. This is needed to access required government online services to business there.
Seems like a pretty common scenario globally. It is. And it requires a blend of physical operations and digital navigation. The entrepreneur might need to visit a physical kiosk to register or use a PC with a smart card reader. They have to respond to prompts, maybe for inserting a card or providing a fingerprint scan.
Okay.
Digitally, they need to navigate web browsers, input personal and security information email, password, mobile number, ID details, and identify standard interface elements like icons, buttons, and forms to complete the registration process.
That sounds like a fairly standard level of digital literacy needed for many online government services today. What's the more complex e-government scenario described?
The second e-government example involves a supplier submitting a bid through the government of Mauritius e-procurement system. This demands a higher level of digital information literacy and problem-solving ability. Well, The bidder needs to navigate what might be a complex government website, scanning sections like How To or FAQ or Help Desk to find specific information on the bidding process. They have to manage email updates, checking for notifications about the tender. They need to interpret various action icons, drop-down menus, and text boxes within the system.
Right. Understanding the interface.
And crucially, they need to be able to download the invitation for bid documents, which might be complex files, and then upload specific file types, maybe PDFs, spreadsheets, and potentially multiple files from their own computer system into the e-procurement system correctly before the deadline.
Uploading specific formats, managing files.
Yeah.
That adds complexity.
It does. This involves a much more sophisticated interaction with software features and functionalities compared to the single sign-on example.
What's fascinating here is how the inherent complexity of the software and the system itself directly impacts the level of digital information literacy and problem-solving skills required, even within the same domain like government services. It's not just about the user, it's about the system design.
Absolutely.
So we've seen really clearly how digital literacy isn't static. It's deeply contextual and it evolves right alongside the technology.
Yeah.
If we connect this back to the bigger picture, how might these findings inform global education strategies? How do we make sure people are adequately prepared for their specific digital realities, whether they're, farmers in Uganda using an app or entrepreneurs in Dubai navigating complex government portals? It feels like a tailored approach is absolutely essential.
Yeah, that's the key takeaway, really. This is a critical question. The findings powerfully underscore that a generic, one-size-fits-all approach to digital literacy education simply won't cut it.
Yeah.
For global education strategies, it means moving beyond just teaching generic computer skills. The focus needs to shift towards context-specific digital competencies that are directly relevant to people's daily lives and their livelihoods.
So more practical and targeted.
Exactly. For that farmer in Uganda, early interventions might focus specifically on mobile app navigation, understanding online marketplaces, and critically evaluating market prices or product reviews within the app. For the entrepreneur in Dubai, the emphasis might be more on secure online identity management, understanding data privacy and government interactions, and navigating complex e-government portals effectively.
Tailoring the curriculum to the need.
Precisely. It also strongly suggests that policymakers need to be deeply involved. They need to help identify strategic development focuses for their populations, ensure the necessary infrastructure like internet access and affordable devices is actually available, and establish relevant training and perhaps even certification guidelines that support these tailored programs. The pathway mapping methodology itself, the way it breaks down skills for specific tasks, can serve as a really powerful framework. It could help diverse organizations, NGOs, governments, international bodies to coordinate their efforts and foster the specific literacies needed to actually leverage technology for tangible socioeconomic benefit in all these varied contexts. It's about enabling participation.
That's a crucial point about tailored education and coordinated efforts. Now let's pivot a bit. We've talked a lot about functionality and skills, but let's move into something deeply personal. Beyond basic functionality, our digital lives are intensely personal, aren't they?
Absolutely.
Our digital footprint is just growing exponentially. So how do different generations perceive and manage their digital identity and privacy? Especially when we're all faced with this pervasive data collection and targeted advertising. This feels like a space where personal experience and age could create some really significant divides.
Oh, definitely. This segment will truly dive into those nuanced aspects of online privacy. We'll start by defining online privacy and the pervasive nature of data surveillance more clearly.
Okay.
We'll explore the role algorithms play in targeted advertising, unpack that widespread privacy paradox you hear about,
Right.
and then dissect the fascinating generational differences in privacy perceptions and digital behaviors, including how even our communication styles vary online across age groups.
All right. Let's start by clearly defining online privacy and data surveillance. What exactly are we referring to when we talk about a user's privacy online? It feels like a slippery concept sometimes.
It can be. At its core, online privacy is simply about how much of your personal data, everything from what you browse online to what you buy to your location, actually stays private when you're using the internet. It's really about your own sense of integrity and control in this digital space, according to experts in the field.
Your sense of integrity. I like that framing.
Yeah. And this is increasingly challenged by data surveillance, which is the continuous and often pervasive collection of user data by digital media platforms and other online actors. This phenomenon is often described as elusive and multifaceted, meaning it's not always obvious how or when your data is being collected.
Right, it happens in the background.
Exactly. However, targeted advertising serves as a very concrete daily example of this data surveillance in action. You see an ad for something you just searched for that's surveillance feeding targeting. And our modern society is truly an era of hyperconnectivity, meaning that nearly every aspect of life now leaves some kind of digital footprint, from simply communicating with friends and family via messages or social media to online shopping, booking travel, or even tracking your run with a fitness app. The most private and ordinary aspects of people's lives are, in essence, infiltrated by technology and contribute to this ever-growing digital record about us.
That sheer scale of data collection feels a bit overwhelming when you put it like that. And central to how that data gets used is the pervasive role of algorithms in targeted advertising. How do these algorithms actually function to personalize the ads we see, and what are the implications for us as users?
Right. Algorithms are essentially crucial software technologies that classify and manage all this user data. They are, in fact, the most effective method we currently have for automating marketing, working by collecting vast amounts of user data and then using it to predict behavior, what you might buy, what you might click on.
Predicting our next move.
Pretty much. And the scale of this is just immense. It's estimated that roughly 79% of all internet advertising today is fundamentally driven by this kind of software. It's the engine of the online ad economy.
Wow, nearly 80%. So on one hand, this sounds like it could be beneficial, right? Leading to more relevant ads instead of random ones. But there's a darker side too, isn't there? Something related to manipulation.
Exactly. That's the tension. While targeted advertising undoubtedly enhances advertisers' ability to reach and persuade potential customers with greater efficiency and accuracy, showing you ads for products you've recently viewed or seem interested in, there's a significant user perception issue.
Okay.
Studies consistently show that when people receive a personalized advertisement that feels inappropriately close to their interests,
Like too specific.
yeah, uncannily specific, they may find it quite unsettling. This often translates into feelings of being manipulated or perhaps deprived of their freedom of choice, like they're being subtly steered. It highlights that very fine line between helpful personalization and what feels like an invasion of privacy or autonomy.
And this leads us directly to what's called the privacy paradox. It's a concept I've definitely heard about, and I bet many people listening have done this exact thing, clicked accept on cookies without reading a single word.
Oh, absolutely. We all do it.
It seems to perfectly encapsulate a common, somewhat contradictory behavior online.
The privacy paradox is a really well-documented phenomenon in research. It describes how internet users often state that they value their privacy highly, expressing significant concerns about data collection and security.
Right, we say we care.
We say we care, exactly. Yet their actual online actions, like willingly sharing vast amounts of personal information on social media profiles, or accepting lengthy terms and conditions and cookie policies without reviewing them, often demonstrate the exact opposite behavior.
Guilty as charged.
Right. This paradoxical behavior, this disconnect between stated attitudes and actual practices, is a significant and really common aspect of online privacy that has been widely documented in quantitative studies across different populations.
That's fascinating. It points to a real struggle many of us have in translating our genuine privacy concerns into consistent online behavior. Maybe it's too hard, or we feel powerless.
That could be part of it. Convenience often wins out, or maybe a sense of futility.
Now, let's talk about generational differences in privacy perceptions and digital behaviors. We often hear these labels thrown around: digital natives and digital immigrants. How do these groups really differ in their approach to online privacy and digital interaction, according to the research?
Well, the traditional definitions are pretty straightforward. Digital natives are typically seen as the young people born into the digital age, often assumed to be inherently tech-savvy just because they grew up surrounded by it.
Right, they just get it.
That's the assumption. Conversely, digital immigrants are those who learn to use computers and the internet as adults, and they're often assumed to have more difficulty adapting or understanding the nuances.
Okay.
However, more recent research suggests it's probably more accurate to think of it as a continuum, maybe call it digital fluency, rather than a rigid binary dichotomy.
So not just two distinct groups.
Exactly. This perspective really challenges the simplistic idea that all young people are automatically tech masters. Studies, like one from the University of Adelaide mentioned in the sources, highlight that even seemingly basic skills, such as understanding what a hyperlink is and how it works, often need to be explicitly taught to younger generations. They're not born knowing these things.
That's a really important point.
Yeah.
So the distinction isn't as clear-cut as some might assume. What does the research specifically say about how digital immigrants perceive privacy online?
Studies focused on digital immigrants reveal what researchers call a substantial lack of knowledge and awareness regarding digital media operations and data collection practices.
Okay, so a knowledge gap.
A significant one, yeah.
Yeah.
They frequently view the internet as a fundamentally risky environment. They express considerable concern about sharing things like contact information, especially credit card numbers online, and they often fear being hacked.
Understandable fears.
Very much so. And interestingly, some even go as far as to avoid using specific social media platforms entirely, precisely because of these privacy worries. A key finding related to the paradox is their difficulty in identifying targeted advertisements, suggesting they may not fully grasp how their online behavior is being tracked and used to influence them commercially.
So high concern, but maybe lower awareness of the specific mechanisms like targeting. What about digital natives? Are they more aware and perhaps more proactive in protecting their privacy, even if they still show paradoxical behavior?
Generally, yes. While digital natives usually agree that older generations tend to be more cautious overall, they are described in studies as having higher levels of awareness and knowledge about how digital platforms work, mainly due to their lifelong familiarity.
Makes sense.
They tend to be more reflective and critical towards data processing and collection practices, and consequently, they are often more protective of their personal data, at least in principle. However, and this is key, despite this heightened awareness, they still exhibit that same paradoxical behavior we discussed.
So awareness doesn't automatically fix the behavior gap.
Not necessarily. Their actions don't always align perfectly with their stated privacy values either. What's interesting, though, is that digital natives actively employ various coping mechanisms, things like using ad blockers, providing fake information, adjusting privacy settings more frequently, specifically to try and prevent companies from collecting their data.
They're fighting back in a way.
In a way, yes. They report feeling monitored and subtly persuaded by the constant stream of targeted ads taking over their social media feeds, and they're trying to mitigate that. This shows a more conscious, albeit maybe imperfect, effort to navigate and resist the surveillance aspects.
It sounds like both generations, despite their differences in awareness or approach, share a fundamental underlying issue when it comes to trust, right? Even if their specific concerns manifest differently.
That's a critical observation, yes. Research involving both groups found that both expressed a significant lack of trust in digital media platforms.
Why? What was the core reason?
The primary reason cited across the board was their inability to know what information is collected, how much, or what it is used for. It boils down to a fundamental lack of transparency.
That lack of transparency seems huge.
It is. It highlights a universal need for greater clarity and honesty from platforms regarding their data practices. Users feel like they're operating in the dark.
That universal lack of transparency is a massive point. Now, something that might surprise some listeners. Despite these generational differences in privacy perception and maybe coping strategies, there's apparently a striking trend toward convergence in digital media usage. What does this mean exactly? Are older and younger people using tech more similarly now?
Yeah, it's an interesting finding. This refers to a noticeable trend where the digital media consumption habits of younger adults, say 16-34-year-olds, and older adults, those aged 55 plus, are actually becoming more similar over time.
Really? How so?
Well, while previous reports often noted a clear divergence in how these groups used media, recent findings show a marked shift towards eventual convergence. And this was particularly accelerated by the COVID-19 pandemic.
The pandemic effect.
Exactly. It essentially forced many older generations to rapidly increase their digital media uptake for essential tasks. Things like staying in touch with loved ones during lockdowns, shopping for groceries online when they couldn't go out.
They had to adapt quickly.
They really did. And many quickly adapted, becoming more confident and comfortable with digital media and devices as a result. So while the younger age group is nearing what you might call peak digital penetration, their patterns of consumption are kind of leveling out because almost everyone in that group is already online.
Right.
The older age group still has significant room for growth in their digital media usage. They're catching up, in a sense.
So the pandemic acted as a major catalyst for older generations to bridge parts of the digital divide, essentially learning new skills out of necessity.
Precisely. However, it's really important to maintain perspective here. Despite this encouraging increase in similarity, a measured correlation between the two age groups still represents a significant dissimilarity in overall media consumption habits.
Okay, so converging but still distinct.
Very much so. While they are getting closer, they are far from identical in their habits. As one report puts it, trying to use a one-size-fits-all media plan for both groups would still be more aligned to one-size-fits-none. You
Right.
still need tailored approaches.
That's a great reminder that even with convergence, significant differences persist. And these differences extend beyond just usage patterns to actual communication styles, which impacts how generations interact digitally. We've seen quite a lot of online discussion recently, sort of humorous sometimes, about the millennial nod versus Gen Z's minimal expressions in video calls. What's actually behind these different approaches, according to experts?
Yeah, it's a fascinating cultural and behavioral observation that gets a lot of attention. Clinical psychologists explain that millennials often use very visible gestures like nodding frequently or smiling broadly in video conferencing.
Yeah, the constant nodding.
Right. This is largely a way to convey attentiveness, warmth, and agreement nonverbally. This behavior seems to have been shaped by social conditioning and workplace expectations from a period that really emphasized visible collaboration and displaying emotional intelligence.
Okay.
So, in the absence of full face-to-face interaction cues, a nod or a smile became a crucial nonverbal signal to compensate for silence, maybe reassure the speaker they're being heard, and signal active listening. It just became kind of ingrained in their online meeting communication style.
So it's about making sure the other person feels heard and acknowledged, especially when you can't be in the same physical room. What about Gen Z then? Their style often seems to be perceived as the opposite, much more reserved.
That's the common perception, yes. Gen Z tends towards subtler, more minimal expressions during video calls. Experts are quick to clarify, though, that this isn't usually a sign of disinterest or a lack of empathy.
Okay, so not boredom?
Probably not. Rather, it likely reflects a different cultural and digital upbringing. Having grown up immersed in constant, fast-paced, highly visual online content, they tend to value authenticity over what might feel like overt performance in communication.
Authenticity over performance.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, for them, an overuse of gestures or affirmations might actually come across as performative or maybe even inauthentic. Minimal expression can also be a way for many Gen Z individuals to conserve emotional energy. Video calls can be draining and maintain personal boundaries. It allows them to express calmness or neutrality without feeling constant pressure to actively affirm others nonstop.
This sounds like a potential minefield for misinterpretation in workplaces or even social video calls. How can different generations navigate these contrasting styles without constantly misreading each other's intentions?
That's the challenge. The key, experts suggest, is to practice curiosity over judgment.
Curiosity over judgment. I like that.
Yeah. When differences in expression or response are noticed, instead of immediately assuming disengagement or insincerity, we can ask ourselves, what values or experiences might be informing that person's behavior? Open discussions about preferred communication styles within teams or even families can be really helpful.
So actually talk about it.
Exactly. For example, a millennial might explain, hey, when I nod a lot, it just means I'm listening intently, while a Gen Z individual might share, just so you know, my quietness usually indicates I'm comfortable in processing, not disinterested. Recognizing that no single style is inherently superior is absolutely crucial for fostering mutual respect and building empathy across these generational communication divides.
That's excellent practical advice for bridging those potential communication gaps. Finally, in this section, let's talk about a growing and really significant concern: parental concerns and digital consent, especially when it comes to children's online presence. The numbers cited in the research here are quite stark, aren't they?
They are indeed. It highlights a significant and growing worry about children's privacy, largely stemming from the sheer volume of content parents themselves share online, sometimes called sharenting.
Sharenting, right?
Studies show that by the time the average child reaches age 13, they have over 1,300 images of themselves posted online, often by their parents.
1,300, wow.
It's a lot. And even more striking, an estimated 81% of parents report regularly sharing content about their children online, often without fully considering the potential long-term implications or the impacts on the child's developing digital footprint and sense of self. This has really sparked urgent discussions about consent and digital identity for minors.
So digital consent in this context goes far beyond just a simple, can I post this picture? Particularly for children who might not grasp the permanence or reach of the internet. What does that truly entail for parents trying to navigate this responsibly?
That's right. Digital consent in this context is seen as a dynamic and evolving concept. Experts emphasize how early exposure to social media sharing by parents can profoundly impact a child's developing sense of self and autonomy. It's not just about what is shared, but how that sharing shapes their perception of their own digital presence and their right to control it.
How it shapes their sense of self.
Yeah, and interestingly, research indicates a really positive outcome associated with seeking consent. Children whose parents regularly seek their input and consent for online sharing show significantly higher levels of self-advocacy skills by the time they reach adolescence, maybe around 40% higher, according to one study.
40% higher self-advocacy. That's a remarkable positive outcome. So what are the expert recommendations for implementing these consent practices effectively within families? How can parents do this well?
Experts recommend establishing clear guidelines for digital sharing through regular, open family discussions about online presence. It's not a one-time conversation.
Right, ongoing.
A comprehensive approach includes developing age-appropriate consent protocols that actually evolve as the child grows and understands more. It also involves establishing clear boundaries with extended family and friends regarding sharing content about the children, telling grandma not to post photos without checking first.
Setting boundaries with others, yeah?
And leading child psychologists suggest implementing something like a digital check-in system. This is where children can regularly review content about themselves that has been posted online and provide input, maybe even exercise veto power, over their online presence as they get older. This practice has been shown to significantly increase children's sense of autonomy by potentially up to 45%, while simultaneously helping to maintain healthy family communication and relationships around digital life. It's really about empowering the child to have agency over their digital identity from an early age.
This whole section raises such an important question, though. If both users, young and old, and even well-meaning parents, struggle so much with understanding and managing digital privacy, and the platforms themselves continue to collect vast amounts of data, often opaquely, what are the broader implications for trust in our digital society? How can individuals truly gain agency over their digital footprint in a world that seems built on increasing surveillance? It feels like we're constantly playing catch-up against a system that's designed to harvest data.
You're right. This is indeed a core challenge, and it points towards a deepening crisis of trust, potentially. When users feel constantly monitored, when they suspect their data is being exploited without their full understanding or meaningful consent, and when they lack clear knowledge or practical control over their digital footprint, it inevitably erodes their trust, not just in specific online platforms, but potentially in the digital ecosystem as a whole.
So what's the way forward? How do we gain agency?
Gaining true agency requires a multi-pronged approach, I think. It's not just one thing. Individuals certainly need enhanced digital literacy, particularly focusing on critical data evaluation skills and effective privacy management strategies. Educators need to embed these skills early and continuously throughout learning. But crucially, and this echoes our later discussion, platforms must be held more accountable. There needs to be a push for designing more transparent, ethical systems that genuinely prioritize user privacy and control, rather than solely optimizing for engagement metrics and data collection above all else.
A systemic shift.
Exactly. Without this kind of systemic shift, individual efforts to gain agency, while important, will always feel like an uphill battle against powerful, often opaque technological and economic forces. The ideal is to shift the burden, at least partially, back onto the system designers.
Our last conversation really hit home how challenging digital privacy can be, constantly feeling like we're, playing catch up. And that leads us perfectly into something truly counterintuitive we teased earlier. We often assume, almost automatically, that the more time we spend online, the more digitally savvy we become, right?
Seems logical.
It seems logical. Practice makes perfect, more exposure equals more skill. But what if there's a point where more engagement actually decreases our ability to critically evaluate information? This finding really challenges a fundamental assumption many of us hold about learning in the digital age.
It absolutely does. This segment will unpack that unexpected, almost paradoxical truth. We'll find evidence for a fascinating nonlinear relationship between digital engagement and informational literacy. We'll start by challenging the traditional linear assumption of how digital literacy grows. We'll explore the potential reasons behind this surprising decline at higher engagement levels. And then we'll discuss the significant moderating effect of online exposure in advertising, ultimately connecting it to how deceptive ads and the very architecture of platforms contribute to this complex problem.
Okay, so let's get right into it. Challenging the linear assumption of digital literacy growth. What have traditional models typically suggested, and what is this newer research telling us that's so different?
Traditionally, most models of digital literacy have assumed a pretty straightforward linear relationship. Basically, the idea was, as your digital citizenship, let's call it DIGCIT for short, reflecting things like responsible and engaged online behavior improves, then your digital information literacy, or DIGILIT, your ability to find, evaluate, and use information effectively online, also increases proportionally.
More engagement equals better skills, simple line graph going up.
Exactly. This perspective implies that more experience online directly translates, almost automatically, to a better ability to discern good information from bad. However, a recent study, one projected for 2025 publication cited in our sources, provides compelling evidence that challenges this long-held assumption. Their research points to a distinctly curvilinear relationship instead.
Curvilinear. Okay, so not a straight line up. What does that look like? What does that mean for digital literacy?
It means the relationship looks more like an inverted U shape, or at least a curve that flattens and then potentially dips. So, while initially higher levels of DIGCIT are indeed associated with an improved capacity to detect deceptive content, meaning the more you engage responsibly online, the better you become at spotting fakes initially.
Okay, that part makes sense.
This benefit peaks at a certain saturation point. The study pinpointed this peak at a DIGCIT score of about 0.511 on their scale. Beyond this threshold, the really surprising finding is that further increases in digital citizenship actually correspond with the decline in digital information literacy.
Wait, so you get worse at spotting fake stuff if you're too engaged online, even if you're trying to be a good digital citizen? That's really counterintuitive.
It is, isn't it?
What are the researchers suggesting might be the reasons for this puzzling decline? It sounds almost like a kind of mental burnout or overload.
It could very well be related to that. The study posits that this unexpected decline at higher engagement levels is likely due to several interacting factors. One is simply cognitive overload.
Too much information.
Exactly. The sheer volume of information, the constant notifications, the endless scroll, it can overwhelm an individual's finite capacity to process everything deeply and evaluate it critically. Your brain just gets tired.
Yeah.
There's also the risk of complacency or maybe overconfidence in one's online judgment. Users who spend a ton of time online might start to believe they are highly skilled at spotting misinformation simply because they are always online, which could lead them to let their guard down.
I've seen it all. I know it's real.
That kind of attitude. Precisely. This might also manifest as what some call misinformation fatigue. Users become so accustomed to encountering deceptive content, junk news, scams, that they either become desensitized to it or they simply stop putting in the cognitive effort required to critically evaluate every single piece of information they encounter. It's just too exhausting.
You just throw your hands up.
Right. Or they might start to over-rely on mental shortcuts, heuristics that might work okay for simple things but aren't always accurate when faced with complex or subtle forms of digital deception.
So it's not just that spending more time online isn't necessarily helping after a certain point. It could actively be hurting our ability to think critically online. That's a really powerful and slightly worrying insight.
That is sobering, yeah.
And the study also points specifically to the moderating effect of online exposure and advertising. How does simply being online more hours per day or seeing more ads influence this curvilinear relationship?
This is where the plot thickens even further. The study found that, generally speaking, increased exposure to online media just measured in hours per day is associated with lower digital literacy scores overall.
More hours, lower scores.
Yes. To be specific, individuals who reported spending between 4 to 6 hours online daily showed a gradual decline in both their DIGCIT scores and their DIGILIT scores compared to those who were online for a more moderate 1 to 3 hours a day. And this downward pattern continued as reported online time increased further.
So maybe the sweet spot for maintaining maximum critical discernment online might actually be at moderate levels of engagement, not excessive, always-on engagement.
That seems to be what the data suggests, and the role of online advertisements in this is particularly impactful. The study found that online advertisement exposure significantly moderates this curvilinear relationship between citizenship and literacy.
How does it moderate it?
High ad exposure, which they defined in the study as seeing online ads more than 30 times a day, which sounds like a lot but is probably common for many people,
Easily done, yeah.
was found to weaken the positive effect of digital citizenship on digital information literacy. This means that even if you're trying to be a responsible digital citizen, if you're constantly bombarded by ads, your ability to critically evaluate information across the board can be undermined or diminished by that sheer volume of commercial messaging.
So the ad bombardment itself kind of dulls your critical senses, even if you're otherwise trying to be savvy.
That appears to be the effect, yes.
Hmm.
It highlights that simply spending more time online or being exposed to more content and ads does not automatically enhance digital literacy. In fact, beyond a certain point, it can become actively detrimental. It's like, as you said, maybe eating too much of even a potentially good thing isn't healthy.
Right. Now let's dig into how deceptive ads and the platform architecture itself contribute to this problem. It can't just be about the user's individual psychology or fatigue, can it? The environment must play a role.
You're absolutely right. It's not solely about individual user limitations. Psychology definitely plays a part in why deceptive ads spread. Things like consumer self-perception can influence their susceptibility. For example, if an ad plays on an insecurity, you might be less critical. Even initially, skeptical consumers can be misled if they lack sufficient media literacy skills to recognize sophisticated deceptive practices, and many existing digital literacy frameworks maybe don't adequately prepare consumers for the nuances of modern online advertising deception.
Okay.
Furthermore, social norms play a big role. They significantly shape how consumers perceive deception. Misleading ads that align with broadly accepted societal norms, maybe ads for weight loss products or certain financial schemes, are often less likely to be scrutinized critically, making it harder for individuals to evaluate them objectively, even if they possess a baseline level of skepticism.
So our own internal biases and the influence of societal pressures make us vulnerable. But you mentioned platform architecture. How are the very platforms we use every day complicit in this? How does their design contribute?
This is a critical insight from the research and a really important point. A user's ability to detect deception is not solely a function of their personal literacy level. The architecture of the digital platforms themselves significantly contributes to the problem.
How so? What's the core issue with the architecture?
The core issue is that social media algorithms, the code that decides what you see in your feed, are often optimized primarily for engagement, likes, shares, comments, time spent viewing, rather than for qualities like truthfulness or accuracy.
Engagement over truth.
That's the fundamental conflict. This design choice, prioritizing engagement above all else, can inadvertently amplify deceptive advertisements, particularly those that utilize sensational headlines, emotionally charged content, or clickbait tactics, precisely because such content tends to generate higher engagement metrics. The algorithm rewards what spreads, not necessarily what's true or helpful.
So the platforms are essentially incentivizing the spread of potentially deceptive content because it keeps users clicking and scrolling. That's a huge conflict of interest when it comes to fostering information literacy.
It's a massive conflict. And adding to this problem, the very design of online advertising often deliberately tries to seamlessly blend paid promotions with organic content.
Like native advertising or influencer posts that aren't clearly marked.
Exactly. Sponsored posts that look just like regular posts, influencer marketing where the hashtag ad is buried or tiny. This is often done intentionally, blurring the lines between what is an editorial or user-generated post and what is a paid sponsored message. This makes critical evaluation significantly more difficult for the average user because it requires a constant high degree of cognitive effort just to differentiate between what's authentic content and what's actually an advertisement in disguise.
And what about emerging threats? Things like AI-generated misinformation or deepfake advertising. That was just throw another huge wrench into the works.
Absolutely. The rise of AI-driven misinformation, synthetic media, and deepfake advertising further challenges that traditional, simple assumption of linear digital literacy growth. These highly sophisticated tactics can introduce unpredictable swings, what the study calls non-monotonic effects, in how our online engagement impacts our ability to tell what's real from what's fake.
Non-monotonic effects,
Yeah.
meaning it's not a steady progression at all.
Right. Users might, for example, become overconfident in their ability to detect early, clumsy AI-generated fakes, which ironically could lead to increased susceptibility when they encounter much more sophisticated, undetectable, deceptive tactics later on. It creates a whole new level of cognitive challenge, requiring an evolving skill set that simply spending more time online does not guarantee you'll develop. You might just get fooled more cleverly.
What's truly fascinating, and frankly a bit disturbing here, is that the very systems designed to connect us and engage us might, paradoxically, be actively undermining our ability to discern truth and making us more vulnerable to manipulation. If we connect this back to the bigger picture, how could we possibly foster genuine digital intelligence, real critical thinking online, when the digital environment itself can function as a kind of cognitive trap, constantly trying to optimize for engagement over accuracy? It feels like we're swimming against a very strong current.
Yeah, this raises a really important question about systemic responsibility, doesn't it? Fostering genuine digital intelligence in such an environment requires a much more multifaceted approach that extends way beyond just educating individual users.
Yeah, it has to be more than just telling people to be critical.
Absolutely. It demands a fundamental reevaluation of the design principles of these platforms. There needs to be a serious push for a shift away from engagement at all costs towards designs that inherently promote, or at least don't undermine, truthfulness, transparency, and critical thinking.
How could that even happen?
Well, it might mean advocating for regulatory frameworks that hold platforms more accountable for the content their algorithms amplify and the ways their design choices enable deception. Without seriously addressing the architectural complicity of these digital environments, individual digital literacy efforts, while still necessary, will always be a partial solution. They leave users trying to navigate a deliberately obfuscated and cognitively taxing landscape largely on their own. The ultimate challenge, I think, is to figure out how to re-engineer the digital commons, this online space we all inhabit, to be a place that actively supports rather than subtly subverts our collective ability to discern and make informed judgments. That's the big systemic question.
Okay, so given these complexities, the challenges around privacy, the generational differences, and especially this surprising finding that too much digital engagement can actually backfire on our literacy,
Yeah.
where do we go from here? What actionable steps can actually be taken? This clearly isn't just about individuals improving their skills. It seems to involve educators and perhaps most crucially the technology platforms themselves to foster a more robust and ethical digital literacy for everyone.
You're absolutely right. The responsibility is shared, and it's definitely multi-layered. It's not just on one group. For this final segment, we'll explore some proposed solutions that emphasize, first, shifting more of the burden onto platforms.
Okay.
Second, empowering the learner through new educational approaches, and importantly, a crucial mindset shift. And finally, looking at the practical implications for organizations and society at large, fostering a culture of continuous adaptation in the face of this ever-evolving technology.
All right, so let's start with what you called shifting the burden, platform responsibility. What's the so what here for these incredibly powerful tech companies who create and essentially control these digital environments we spend so much time in? What should they be doing?
Well, the research strongly suggests that online platforms, simply due to their immense influence on information flow and public discourse, bear a significant responsibility to help create a safer, more truthful information ecosystem. A key recommendation is that the burden of detecting deceptive content, particularly deceptive advertising, must shift, at least partially, from individual users to the platforms themselves.
Okay, putting the onus on them.
Yes.
Yeah.
This means moving beyond just content moderation after the fact, towards a fundamental redesign of the architectural and algorithmic systems that currently, even if unintentionally, facilitate the spread of deception.
How would that algorithmic redesign actually work in practice? It sounds like a massive technical and maybe even philosophical challenge for them.
It is, no doubt. But concretely, it entails re-engineering their content ranking and ad delivery algorithms to actively deprioritize deceptive content. Instead of solely optimizing for clicks, shares, or other engagement metrics, platforms should incorporate things like advertiser credibility scores into the algorithms that determine ad visibility.
Advertiser credibility scores.
Yeah.
So punish bad actors algorithmically.
Essentially, yes. Ads from entities with a documented history of deceptive practices, or those flagged by independent fact-checkers, would be shown less frequently, or perhaps restricted, rather than being potentially amplified simply because they use sensational tactics that generate high engagement. Make trustworthiness a factor in reach.
Okay, so changing the algorithm's priorities. What about the way ads look and feel? You mentioned earlier how they often blend in so seamlessly with regular posts.
That's another key area for platform responsibility, moving towards much greater transparency in design.
Hmm.
This means implementing clear, prominent, and maybe even standardized labels across the industry for all advertisements and sponsored content.
Making it obvious what's an ad.
Exactly. The goal is to prevent them from blending almost indistinguishably with organic posts, making it effortless for users to immediately identify what is paid content versus what is not. The current blurring of lines is often intentional. It serves the advertiser, but it significantly contributes to user confusion and susceptibility to manipulation. Standardized, clear labeling is a must.
That seems like a reasonable ask. Now, could AI, which we know contributes to some of the problems like deep fakes, also be part of the solution here? Can AI help users navigate this?
That's a really interesting possibility, yes. Platforms could potentially embed AI-driven tools designed to assist users directly in detecting deceptive advertisements or misinformation.
Like a little helper AI in your feed.
Sort of. But critically, these tools would need to be designed carefully. They should aim to provide comprehensible insights to users, clear, concise explanations of why something might be deceptive, rather than just overwhelming them with excessive generic warning labels or complex jargon-filled fact-checking reports that people rarely read.
So useful, understandable assistance, not just more noise.
Exactly. Imagine a context-aware AI assistant that could subtly highlight potentially misleading claims within an advertisement you're looking at and offer a brief, clear explanation. That could be powerful.
That would be incredibly helpful. What other responsibilities do social media platforms or even e-commerce sites have in this?
Well, social media platforms could also introduce things like adaptive content filters. These could potentially adjust a user's exposure to certain types of ads based on their past engagement history or perhaps even their demonstrated literacy skills, helping to prevent that advertising fatigue and cognitive saturation we talked about.
The overload effect.
Right, which can ironically lead to less digital information literacy.
Mhm.
Furthermore, e-commerce platforms, which are essentially massive marketplaces where deceptive product claims can be rampant, should implement robust credibility scoring mechanisms for their sellers or advertisers. This could involve flagging or even restricting advertisers who have a documented history of making deceptive claims, thereby ensuring a safer transaction environment for consumers. The overall goal of all these strategies is really to place greater responsibility on the platforms themselves, to actively help users navigate the complexities of digital deception, rather than leaving the entire burden solely on the individual consumer to figure it all out.
This shift in responsibility towards platforms sounds absolutely crucial, like a fundamental change is needed in how they operate. But what about us, the learners, the users, and the educators who are trying to guide us? What's the so what for us in terms of empowering the learner in this new landscape?
This is equally critical because platforms won't change overnight and individuals still need skills. On the education front, educators simply cannot assume that instructional methods that worked even a few years ago will still be effective today, especially with the rapid rise of generative AI.
AI changes the game for education.
Completely. They must teach students not just how to use tools like ChatGPT, but how to think critically about the content these tools generate, not just using them for quick answers or entertainment, but for deep intellectual engagement, understanding their biases, their limitations, their potential for generating plausible-sounding nonsense.
So critical AI literacy is now essential. And what about that whole concept of digital natives being inherently tech savvy? We've already touched on how that's largely a myth, but how does recognizing that translate into actual teaching strategies?
It means educators must actively debunk the myth of the digital native. We cannot assume young people automatically possess these complex, critical digital literacy skills. Even basic things like understanding how a hyperlink works or evaluating a source's domain name often need explicit teaching.
Teach the basics, don't assume.
Exactly. Furthermore, there's a growing societal push, in some places, to limit social media access for preteens. If this trend continues, many of the positive collaborative and crowdsourcing skills that might have been informally learned through early social media use will need to be taught more overtly in other educational contexts, maybe through structured online group projects or participation in safe, moderated online communities or civic engagement initiatives. We'll have to be more intentional about teaching those collaborative digital skills.
That's a really good point about having to explicitly teach skills that might have once been picked up more passively online. How do educators encourage deeper learning when instant answers from AI tools are just so easily accessible? It feels like fighting against the tide of convenience.
That's arguably one of the biggest challenges for educators right now. How do you develop strategies to genuinely encourage students to take the time to learn, to wrestle with complex ideas, even when an AI can generate a seemingly perfect answer in seconds? Learning is often hard work, but grabbing an answer from a tool is easy.
So how do you do it?
It likely requires fostering a classroom culture and designing assignments that value the process of inquiry, critical thinking, and original thought over just the speed or polish of the final output. Maybe focusing more on the research trail, the critical evaluation steps, the justification of reasoning, rather than just the end product.
Emphasizing the how, not just the what. And connecting learning to the real world has always been important in education. But how does that apply specifically to teaching digital literacy in this complex environment?
It means teaching digital literacy skills whenever possible in authentic, real-world situations rather than just abstract exercises. For example, instead of just writing an essay for the teacher, have students actually tweet thoughtfully or write blog posts for a public audience. That forces them to consider purpose, audience, tone, and potential impact in a much more meaningful way.
Real stakes.
Right. When working on projects that involve different cultures, educators can foster cross-cultural communication skills by explicitly discussing inequalities related to language access or digital infrastructure differences online. It also involves ensuring students learn about digital content accessibility, teaching them practical things like using readable fonts, choosing accessible color schemes in their creations, and the importance of providing alternative text for images to support users with visual disabilities, making the digital world inclusive.
Practical skills for responsible creation.
Exactly. And all of this also helps build confidence. Building students' genuine confidence in their digital literacy skills, moving beyond just basic operation, takes time and requires practice in these kinds of authentic contexts.
And this leads us to what feels like a really important paradigm shift in how we view everyone's digital competence now. The idea proposed in the research that we are all digital immigrants now. What exactly does that mean? Why are we all immigrants in this new age?
It's a powerful framing. The idea is that the incredibly rapid rise of generative AI has fundamentally redrawn the boundaries of digital expertise so quickly and so profoundly that it's time to view everyone, regardless of their age or their prior digital experience, as essentially a learner, an immigrant navigating a new and unfamiliar digital frontier.
So the playing field has been leveled in a way.
In a significant way, yes. This mindset fosters inclusivity because no one is automatically an expert anymore. It encourages shared responsibility for learning and teaching each other. And it promotes humility, recognizing that these powerful generative AI tools are transformative, yes, but they are still rapidly evolving, often unpredictable, and have significant limitations and ethical implications we're all still grappling with. These tools are no longer just passive repositories of information like a search engine was. They are active participants in creation, blurring the lines between human intelligence and machine intelligence in ways we haven't seen before. This new era demands a form of literacy that combines technical aptitude with deep ethical reasoning and constant adaptability. It's about understanding not just how to use the tools, but when their use is appropriate, why you're using them, and critically, sometimes when to choose to work without them. We must all continually work to demystify these complex systems together.
That's a really powerful and, as you said, humbling perspective. We're all navigating this new territory together, learning as we go. Finally, then, what are the practical implications for organizations and society as a whole? What's the so what for employers, for policymakers, from everything we've discussed today?
For organizations, especially businesses, this means rethinking workplace policies. Companies need to reevaluate their policies on things like employee social media use, trying to balance legitimate concerns about productivity loss or data security with the expectations of digital natives, who often value freedom and flexibility in their work styles and tools.
Finding that balance.
Exactly. It also means actively leveraging the skills that different generations bring. Organizations can significantly benefit from digital natives' often strong proficiency in collaboration and communication tools by fostering team building, encouraging open collaboration, and providing frequent feedback, as these are often their preferred ways of working and accomplishing tasks. Don't stifle those skills, harness them.
And for all employees, not just the younger generation entering the workforce, what's crucial for keeping everyone's digital fluency up to date in this rapidly changing environment?
Providing continuous development opportunities is absolutely key. This includes offering relevant training programs, maybe ensuring employees have adequate home access to computers and the internet if needed for remote work or upskilling, and fostering peer coaching environments where colleagues can learn from each other to improve digital fluency for all employees, regardless of their starting point or generation. It's about lifelong learning now.
Makes sense. And looking at the broader societal level.
At the broader level, frameworks like the Digital Literacy Global Framework,
Hmm.
DLGF, and the pathway mapping methodology we discussed earlier can serve as a really valuable scaffolding framework for enabling multi-stakeholder collaboration.
Getting everyone on the same page.
Exactly. It allows diverse organizations, NGOs working on the ground, government ministries setting policy, international bodies providing funding or standards to coordinate their efforts and work together more effectively to support digital literacy development in target communities.
So it's about a coordinated strategic effort across different levels of society. What specific responsibilities do policymakers like government ministries have in this picture?
Policymakers, for example, ministries of agriculture or education or commerce, need to consider strategic development focuses that actively align national goals with digital advancements and literacy needs. They must also assess and work to improve infrastructure availability, reliable internet access, affordable devices are prerequisites for digital
I
literacy.
can't have literacy without access?
Precisely. They need to establish clear training and certification guidelines for digital literacy programs to ensure quality and relevance. And they should provide incentives and support, maybe funding, resources, policy frameworks to relevant NGOs doing the work on the ground, and perhaps even directly to individual users trying to upskill. The overall goal is to ensure that the digital environment being created is genuinely enabling, not hindering, widespread literacy development. This really calls for a continuous, adaptive, and highly collaborative approach from all sectors to build a more literate and equitable digital future.
We've certainly journeyed through an intricate landscape of digital literacy today. We started with global definitions, moved to exploring real-world applications across continents and sectors, then dissected those fascinating generational perspectives on privacy and digital behavior, and finally confronted that surprising counterintuitive truth about how overwhelming digital engagement can actually backfire on our critical thinking.
Mm-hmm.
What really stands out to me is that true digital literacy isn't just about technical know-how, is it? It's so much more about judgment, critical evaluation, ethical awareness, and perhaps above all, a constant adaptation to an ever-changing digital environment. We've seen that the responsibility for fostering this literacy isn't solely on the individual user, but significantly on the platforms and the policies that shape our digital experience.
Exactly. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the insights from this deep dive really emphasize that we are all, in a very real sense, digital immigrants now in the age of generative AI. We're all navigating new frontiers where the rules are still being written, the maps are still being drawn. The challenge ahead isn't just to keep up with the newest tools and apps, but to critically understand how these technologies influence us, influence society, and to demand greater transparency and accountability from the complex systems we increasingly rely on. This raises, I think, an important question for you, our listener, to reflect on. In a world where AI-driven content is becoming increasingly indistinguishable from human creation, and where our own digital habits can paradoxically diminish our critical judgment, perhaps the ultimate digital literacy isn't actually about knowing everything. Maybe it's more about knowing what we don't know, cultivating intellectual humility, and continuously seeking to understand the often invisible forces shaping our online lives and choices. What will you choose to learn next about this evolving digital world?